right, this is when I was an artist, 50, 60 years ago. This was painted for one of the first projects to painted my museum walls. This was before Bridget Riley. This was the last piece I did, influenced by the abstract expressionist, sponsored by the CIA. But here, I got drafted, and I was in the Army. This is actually from a body of work 50 years after what you just saw. In between is of 25, 30 years of filmmaking, and then computer modeling and animation. And so I really wasn't a painter. I wasn't an artist anymore, I was a filmmaker. And so all of this, these images come from animations, from films, from 15-minute movies. And I gradually began to, sort of each year maybe, I would render a frame as a big print, which again, 10, 20 years ago, that was sort of a complicated exercise. But as the work progressed, I began to look at the photographs and the computer modeled material and begin to find how little I knew about the world around me until I began to look at the atmosphere and the dimensions that you modeled, that you built, understanding the textures and surfaces. This is actually a photograph, but it doesn't make much difference. So what actually, out of the filmmaking, was political filmmaking, political documentaries from Mississippi to Hanoi to the barrios in San Diego to Grenada Revolution. And so the artist was, for me at that point, was a revolutionary. This was way back then, but it was really to bring a consciousness, a look at the world we lived in a way that wasn't just like abstract painting, which the CIA, of course, loved, you know, because that was like completely, certainly not social realism, you know. So that all the work was really like trying to find how to bring a consciousness, a political consciousness to the world we lived in through the art or film, because I wasn't really an artist anymore. Until I began to look at what it was that was out there, modeling it, and begin to make these things which were then frames that could be framed and painted or rendered, I guess you say, rendered now, which was really a big step because it was a frame out of a movie, a single moment, from a whole series of images that I was working with. And so I'd actually done a piece called A Nostalgia for Paint. You know, it's like sort of like I'd modeled the animations or the single frames of a painting. No, it's not a painting, but they were then hung around a gallery in a virtual tour of what a gallery might look like. And it was through that I began to think how we really need something else. We need another way to communicate, to think about how we get together and how we talk to one another. And rocks really became, I began to think that my son was a psychology, geology major. I remember thinking he could learn how rocks think, actually. And so here you began to feel, or I began to feel like there was another way of getting together, another way to think about the world we lived in, because clearly politically the experiences as a revolutionary were failed or certainly more complicated than people had imagined. And so it seemed like here was a way to think about getting together, another way to live with what we were really a part of. And then the friend said, you don't have to talk all the time. You can just look at this, you know. So until maybe we can understand that there's really another way to think about the world we're living in, we're not going to, really get it together. But here again, this is like where you begin to look at the reflections and ways in which I hadn't had the opportunity prior to being able to begin to build my world. This, on the other hand, was shot out of a bus window in Iceland with an iPhone. So you really can do it however you want to do it. And this is just Lake Champlain. And here's more computer-generated material. Sometimes people look at some of these and they say, oh, I know exactly where that is. But I've been working with the trees, and not to mention the flood, or the cities, let's say, the cities. That this is the most recent work. This is part of, again, a frame out of a complete animation of the bird flying out of the river, the mouth of the stream that's way back in the woods, coming out to the end of the river mouth as it comes out into the bay, where you see, actually you get around and there's a whole city back in there, but then you run into the problems of how in a continuation, in a pan, this would be a big panorama, for instance, how you actually can begin to put those pieces together to see the whole picture. So that's what I'm working on now. And these are just 2 frames from a big panorama. And of course, this is where we leave off. This is where I started with Bush, Iraqi, Yale graduate, white person. And then along comes Obama. We've got Palestinian, Harvard graduate, and black person. You don't want to kill them either. But of course, it's time for maybe Syrian, Harvard wife, Princeton wife, and mixed race.